Sarah Chin wiped the grease from her hands and stared at the colony's defense readouts with growing concern. The Meridian colony sensors painted a grim picture. The Zax Empire's war fleet had finally arrived, their crystalline ships glinting like deadly stars in the void. Most of the colonists had already evacuated, leaving behind only the defense forces and essential personnel. As the colony's head mechanic, Sarah had refused to leave. "Chin, you're needed in Bay 4, Captain Rodriguez's voice crackled over the comm, another stabilizer failure in the defense grid. Sarah grabbed her custom toolkit, a battered collection of both Earth Standard and jury-rigged tools she'd modified herself. "On my way. How long until they reach engagement range?" 3 hours. Think you can keep our defenses running that long?" She smiled grimly, patting the wrench hanging at her belt, an old-fashioned tool that had saved her life more times than she could count. "I'll do better than that, Captain. I might just have a few surprises for our unwelcome guests." The defense grid's maintenance tunnel was cramped and hot, filled with the hum of overtaxed systems. Sarah crawled through the narrow space, her experienced eyes scanning the machinery. The Zax Empire prided themselves on their superior technology, crystalline computing cores, and quantum-aligned weapon systems that were supposedly generations ahead of human tech. But Sarah had learned long ago that complexity often bred vulnerability. As she worked on the stabilizer, her mind wandered to the stories she'd heard about the Empire's warriors. The Zax considered themselves the pinnacle of evolution, beings of living crystal who viewed organic life as primitive and inherently flawed. Their warriors underwent centuries of training, their bodies permanently bonded with their crystalline armor and weapons. The stabilizer sparked under her hands, and Sarah grinned as she spotted the problem. The colony systems might be a patchwork of human ingenuity and salvaged alien tech, but that meant they were adaptable, unpredictable. And if there was one thing Sarah had learned in her years keeping the colony's machinery running, it was that unpredictability could be a powerful advantage. "Captain," she called over the comm as she made her adjustments. "I've been studying the sensor data from their advanced scouts. Their ship's crystal matrix technology, it has a resonance frequency. In basic English, Chen, everything can break, Captain. You just need to know where to push." She tightened the last connection, and the stabilizer hummed back to life. "And I think I just figured out exactly where to push." The next few hours were a blur of activity as Sarah raced between systems, making modifications that would have given any Imperial engineer a crystalline heart attack. Standard protocols went out the window as she rewired, reconfigured, and completely reimagined the colony's defenses. Her crew of mechanics followed her lead, though more than a few gave her concerned looks as she explained her plan. "You want to deliberately destabilize our own shield harmonics?" her assistant Jake asked, eyes wide. "That's crazy? Maybe. But their targeting systems are designed to adapt to standard frequencies. They've never faced someone crazy enough to randomize their own defenses." Sarah patted the shield generator. "Sometimes the best defense is being too unpredictable to predict." As the Imperial fleet drew closer, Sarah made her way to the colony's command center. The massive viewscreen showed the approaching ships, each one a masterpiece of crystalline engineering, perfect and precise. Too perfect. Too precise. Captain Rodriguez turned as she entered. "Chen, please tell me you have good news." Sarah pulled up her diagnostic display, showing the modifications she'd made. "Better than good news, Captain. I've got a plan." Their entire fleet runs on crystalline technology, perfectly aligned, perfectly synchronized. But crystals have natural frequencies. Hit them just right. Understanding dawned in the captain's eyes, and they shatter. "Exactly." Sarah's fingers flew over the console as she made her final adjustments. "They're expecting us to fight by their rules, use strategies they understand. But they've never faced a human mechanic with a wrench and a bad attitude." The first Imperial ships entered weapons range, their crystalline weapons charging with deadly purpose. Sarah took a deep breath, her hand hovering over the activation sequence she'd prepared. "Time to show them why you should never underestimate human ingenuity," she muttered, and pressed the button. The battle for Meridian Colony was about to begin, and Sarah Chin was ready to prove that sometimes the most dangerous weapon isn't the most advanced, It's the one in the hands of someone crazy enough to rewrite the rules of engagement. The first shots from the Imperial fleet lit up space like a crystal chandelier catching sunlight. Sarah watched from the command center as perfectly synchronized beams of energy lanced toward Meridian Colony's shields. Standard Imperial tactics, beautiful, precise, and utterly predictable. Impact in 3, 2, 1. Sarah counted down, her fingers dancing across her console. Just before the beam struck, she triggered her modifications. The colony's shields flickered, their frequency shifting in a chaotic pattern that would have given any proper engineer nightmares. The Imperial weapons scattered, their energy dispersing across the randomly fluctuating shield harmonics. On the main view screen, Sarah could almost imagine the confusion among the Imperial commanders as their perfect attack dissolved into harmless light. Status report, Captain Rodriguez barked. Shields holding at 92%, Sarah reported, allowing herself a small grin. Their targeting systems can't get a lock on our randomized frequencies. But that's just the beginning. Before she could elaborate, a new signal cut across all comm channels. A face appeared on the main screen, if you could call it a face. The Imperial commander was a being of living crystal, their features sharp and geometric, internal light pulsing with barely contained anger. Attention primitive organic settlement, the commander's voice resonated like glass under pressure. I am Supreme Warrior Crix of the Zax Empire. Your unorthodox defensive measures are noted but futile. Surrender now, and we may preserve your species for study. Sarah couldn't help herself. She stepped forward, ignoring the captain's warning look. Hey there, Your Crystalliness. Sarah Chin, head mechanic. Quick question. How's your fleet's harmonic stabilizer maintenance schedule looking? The crystal face flickered with confusion. Our technology is perfect, maintained by Dash. Yeah, about that, Sarah interrupted, checking readings on her tablet. Those pretty light shows you call weapons? They're putting out some interesting resonance patterns. Might want to check your primary matrix alignment before Dash. A sudden burst of energy from one of the Imperial ships cut her off. But instead of striking the colony's shields, the beam twisted back on itself, its perfect crystalline focusing arrays suddenly misaligned by mere microns. The result was spectacular. Cascade failures rippled through the ship's systems like cracks through ice. Impossible. Crix's face contorted with rage. Our systems are flawless. Flawless is just another word for inflexible, Sarah countered. Here's the thing about us primitive organics, we adapt. We mess up, we learn, we improvise. Your perfect crystal tech? It can't handle chaos. And chaos? She patted her wrench. That's kind of our specialty. The Imperial commander's image vanished, replaced by the view of their fleet launching a full assault. But Sarah was ready. Each modification she'd made to the colony systems introduced just enough uncertainty, just enough chaos, to play havoc with the Empire's rigid protocols. They're deploying ground forces, Rodriguez announced. Dropping crystal warriors in breach pods. Sarah grabbed her toolkit. That's my cue. Captain, keep them busy up here. I need to go introduce some Imperial warriors to good old-fashioned human engineering. As she raced through the colony's corridors, Sarah's mind was already racing through possibilities. The Empire's crystal warriors were legendary, virtually indestructible, perfectly trained, their bodies and weapons formed from the same living crystal as their ships. But Sarah had learned long ago that the more complex a system was, the more ways it could fail. She reached the main engineering bay just as the first breach pods crashed through the outer levels. The sound of crystal weapons discharging echoed through the halls, along with the screams of colonial defenders. Jake, she called to her assistant over the comm. Remember those sonic resonators we salvaged from that abandoned mining facility? The ones you said were too unstable to use? Yeah. Get them to Section C, Level 4. And grab every speaker system you can find. Sarah pulled up schematics on her tablet, making rapid calculations. Time to show these crystal warriors why sometimes the most primitive solution is the most effective. As she worked, Sarah could hear the Imperial warriors getting closer. Their footsteps rang like chimes against the metal floors, their voices harmonizing in tactical frequencies meant to optimize their combat efficiency. Everything about them was designed to be perfect, precise, unbeatable. Sarah smiled as she finished her modifications. Perfect was about to meet its match in human chaos. The first crystal warrior that rounded the corner into engineering was a sight to behold. 3 meters of living crystal, perfectly faceted armor flowing like liquid glass, weapon systems integrated directly into their crystalline form. Sarah had to admit, they were impressive. For about 5 seconds. Then she hit play on her jury-rigged sound system. The warrior's perfect crystalline form vibrated as the salvaged mining resonators pulsed through the air. Not enough to shatter them, they were tougher than that, but enough to disrupt the precise alignments their weapon systems relied on. The warrior staggered, their integrated weapons sputtering and crackling with misaligned energy. "Welcome to the chaos party," Sarah muttered, ducking behind a console as more warriors poured in. She triggered the second phase of her plan. Every speaker, every vibration plate, every piece of equipment capable of producing sound began emanating clashing frequencies. The cacophony was horrible, but the effect on the crystal warriors was worse. Their perfectly synchronized movements became jerky and uncoordinated. Some of their crystal armor began to show stress lines, not enough to break, but enough to worry them. And worried soldiers made mistakes. "This is impossible," one of the warriors shouted, their voice resonating with frustration. "Our systems are perfect. We are the pinnacle of evolution." Sarah lobbed a makeshift sonic grenade, really just a repurposed maintenance drone loaded with speakers, into their midst. "Yeah? Well, we're the pinnacle of making stuff up as we go along." The explosion of sound sent the warriors reeling, but Sarah knew she couldn't keep this up forever. The Empire would adapt, find ways to dampen the vibrations. She needed something more permanent. That's when she noticed one of the warriors behaving oddly. Instead of attacking, they were hanging back, studying her methods with what looked almost like curiosity. The warrior's crystalline form seemed different too, less rigid, more fluid in its movements. Taking a chance, Sarah called out, "Hey, you in the back. You seem less stuck up than your friends. Want to learn how real engineering works?" The warrior hesitated, then spoke in a voice that chimed like wind through crystal. "Your methods defy all known principles of combat engineering. They shouldn't work. And yet, that's because you're all thinking in straight lines," Sarah explained, ducking a blast from one of the other warriors. "Nature doesn't work in straight lines. Chaos, adaptation, evolution, it's all about finding new paths." To her surprise, the curious warrior stepped forward, positioning themselves between Sarah and their companions. "I am engineering specialist CYX. And I wish to understand." The other warriors reacted with horror. "Traitor," they screamed, their weapons charging. "Defect. Impurity." Sarah grabbed CYX and pulled them behind cover just as energy blasts turned their previous position into slag. "Welcome to the chaotic side. First lesson, sometimes the best engineering solution is running away. Follow me." They raced through the maintenance tunnels, Sarah's sound system covering their retreat. As they ran, CYX bombarded her with questions about her modifications, each one revealing both their brilliant mind and the rigid limitations of imperial thinking. "But how can you function without perfect harmonic alignment?" they asked as Sarah led them to her workshop. "Our entire civilization is built on the principle of crystalline perfection." Sarah began pulling parts from her shelves, her mind already racing with new possibilities. "See, that's your problem. You're so focused on perfection, you've forgotten that imperfection is where innovation happens. Watch this." She grabbed her wrench and began modifying one of her sonic devices. With ZYX's knowledge of imperial technology and her talent for chaos, they might just have a chance to save the colony. And maybe, just maybe, show the Empire that perfection isn't all it's cracked up to be. Your weapons, your ships, your whole empire, it's all built on the idea that there's one right way to do things, Sarah explained as she worked. But nature? Life? It's messy. It adapts. It finds new ways. That's not a weakness. That's how you survive. ZYX's crystalline form shimmered with understanding. The rigidity of our perfection, it makes us vulnerable to chaos. Exactly. And guess what? Sarah held up her newly modified device with a grin. Humans? We're really, really good at chaos. You wanna what? Captain Rodriguez's hologram flickered as she stared at Sarah and her crystalline companion. Chin, this is crazy even for you. Sarah continued modifying the colony's main power distribution node, her wrench making adjustments that would have given any standard engineer a heart attack. Look, ZYX has confirmed everything I suspected about their technology. The Empire's whole military strategy relies on perfect synchronization between their ships, warriors, and weapons. And you want to turn our entire colony into one giant resonance weapon? Rodriguez pinched the bridge of her nose. The power requirements alone will be substantial, ZYX chimed in, their crystalline form shifting with excitement. But Sarah's calculations are fascinating. By introducing controlled chaos into your power grid, we can create a cascading wave of destructive frequencies that will In English, please, Rodriguez interrupted. Sarah grinned. We're going to turn their perfect harmony against them. Every system in this colony, from the coffee makers to the defense grid, is going to start singing very, very off-key. Above them, the battle continued. The Imperial fleet had adjusted to Sarah's initial tricks, their weapons now attempting to match the random frequencies of the colony's shields. But that was exactly what she'd been counting on. They're trying to adapt, Sarah explained, but they can only adapt in ways their perfect system allows. They're like a crystal trying to flow like water. They can bend a little, but push them too far. And they break, ZYX finished, their voice containing both sadness and wonder. Our pursuit of perfection has made us brittle, unable to truly change. Sarah patted their crystalline shoulder with her grease-stained hand, leaving a smudge that somehow made ZYX look more alive. That's why you're different. You questioned. You adapted. You chose chaos. The next hours were a blur of frantic work. Sarah, ZIX, and every engineer and mechanic in the colony worked to implement their crazy plan. They turned life support systems into resonance generators, rewired power conduits to produce conflicting frequencies, and transformed the colony's basic infrastructure into one massive weapon. You know what the Empire never understood about humans? Sarah asked as she made the final connections. We're not afraid to break things. Sometimes, including ourselves. Supreme Commander Crix would say that's why we're superior, ZYX observed, helping her calibrate a particularly tricky frequency modulator. That our perfection makes us above such primitive methods. Sarah snorted. Yeah? Well, let's see how superior they feel about this. She activated her comm, Captain, we're ready. Tell everyone to get to the shielded sections. Things are about to get very noisy. The Imperial fleet had drawn closer, confident in their ability to overcome the colony's defenses. Their crystal warriors had regrouped, adapting their formations to account for Sarah's sonic weapons. They thought they had the measure of human ingenuity. They were wrong. Sarah took a deep breath, looking at the activation switch she'd jerry-rigged from spare parts and determination. Hey, ZYX, wanna help me break physics? The crystal being's form sparkled with what Sarah had learned to recognize as laughter. By all logical principles, this plan should fail spectacularly. Welcome to being human. Sarah grabbed her wrench in one hand and the switch in the other. Sometimes spectacular failure is just success with style. She flipped the switch. The effect was immediate and overwhelming. Every system in the colony began emitting carefully calculated frequencies, each one slightly off from perfect harmonics. The discordant energies built upon each other, creating a wave of pure chaos that rippled through space. The Imperial fleet's perfect formation began to waver. Crystal warriors stumbled as their armor resonated with frequencies they were never designed to handle. And through it all, Sarah watched her readings, making constant adjustments with her wrench, conducting an orchestra of beautiful destruction. Their primary matrix is destabilizing, ZYX reported, their own form protected by modifications Sarah had helped them make. The fleet's synchronization is failing. They're trying to adapt, but they can't adapt fast enough, Sarah finished, a fierce grin on her face. Because they're still trying to find the perfect solution. And sometimes, she twisted her wrench, sending another wave of chaos through the colony's systems. Sometimes perfect is the enemy of good enough. Supreme Commander Crix appeared on every screen in the colony, their crystalline form now showing visible stress fractures. "What have you done?" they demanded, voice resonating with fury and fear. "This chaos, this disorder, it defies all natural law." "Natural law?" Sarah laughed, continuing to adjust frequencies with her wrench. "Nature is chaos, Commander. Evolution, adaptation, survival, it's all about embracing imperfection and making it work for you." The Imperial fleet was in disarray. Their perfect formation had shattered, ships struggling to maintain basic functions as the colony's resonance weapon played havoc with their crystalline systems. But Crix wasn't finished. "You think your primitive understanding of chaos can defeat us?" The commander's form pulsed with dangerous energy. "We are the Zax Empire. We have spent millennia perfecting our technology. We cannot be defeated by a mechanic with a wrench." Sarah noticed something in the commander's transmission, subtle frequency shifts that made her eyes narrow. "ZYX," she called to her crystalline friend. "Are they doing what I think they're doing?" ZYX analyzed the readings, their form dimming with concern. "They're attempting to synchronize the entire fleet into a single crystalline matrix. If they succeed, they could theoretically overcome our resonance weapon through sheer power." "That's insane." Sarah checked her own readings. The energy requirements alone would be catastrophic if something went wrong, ZYX finished. "Which, given the current chaos in their systems." Sarah grabbed her toolkit. "Captain, they're about to do something incredibly stupid. We need to get to the main defense control room now." As they raced through the colony's corridors, the effects of their resonance weapon were everywhere. Crystal warriors lay incapacitated, their perfect forms compromised by the chaotic frequencies. But Sarah knew Crix's desperate gambit could still turn the tide. "The Empire teaches us that perfection is strength," ZYX explained as they ran. "By combining all our ships into a single perfect entity, they believe they can overcome any obstacle." "Yeah? Well, I believe they're about to learn why putting all your eggs in one perfectly synchronized basket is a bad idea." Sarah burst into the control room, immediately beginning to modify the main defense systems. "Remember what you said about spectacular failure?" The view screens showed the Imperial fleet drawing together, their ships linking into a vast crystalline lattice that seemed to pulse with pure energy. It was beautiful, perfect, and absolutely terrifying. "Your chaos cannot match our unity." Crix's voice boomed through all channels. "Behold true perfection." Sarah watched the energy readings spike off the charts. "ZIX, help me reverse the polarity on our resonance frequencies. If they want to be one perfect unit, let's give them exactly what they want." Understanding flickered through ZYX's form. "You're going to amplify their synchronization? They think bigger is better?" Sarah's wrench flew over the controls. "Let's see how they handle being too perfect." The Imperial fleet had fully merged now, becoming a single massive crystal structure that dwarfed the colony. Energy built up within it, preparing to release a blast that would overcome any defense through sheer power. But Sarah had learned something in her years of fixing broken machines. Sometimes the most devastating failures come not from too little power, but from too much coordination. Too much perfection. "Hey, Crix," she called over the comm, her hands steady on the controls. "Want to see what happens when you take perfection to its logical conclusion?" She nodded to ZYX, who began adjusting their own frequencies to match the Empire's synchronization. But instead of fighting it, they enhanced it, pushing the harmony to levels even the Empire hadn't dared attempt. The massive crystalline structure began to resonate, its perfect synchronization becoming more and more intense. Fracture lines appeared, spreading like lightning through the unified fleet. "No!" Crix's voice held real fear now. "Stop. You'll destroy everything." "That's the thing about perfection," Sarah replied, making one final adjustment with her wrench. "It only takes one flaw to bring the whole thing crashing down. And you just made yourself into one very big, very perfect flaw." The unified Imperial fleet shimmered in space like a massive diamond catching starlight, beautiful, perfect, and about to shatter. Sarah's modifications had pushed their synchronization beyond sustainable levels, turning their greatest strength into a fatal weakness. "You don't understand what you're doing." Crix's voice reverberated through the command center, their perfect harmonics distorting with panic. This level of synchronization was theoretical. It was never meant to be achieved. "That's your problem right there," Sarah replied, carefully monitoring the resonance levels. "You're so focused on theory and perfection that you never stop to ask if you should. Sometimes the best solutions aren't the perfect ones, they're the ones that actually work." Beside her, Zyx's crystalline form pulsed with a mix of awe and sadness as they watched their former fleet begin to break apart. Our pursuit of perfection, it made us forget that evolution requires imperfection, requires change. The massive crystalline structure was now vibrating at frequencies that made Sarah's teeth hurt, even through the colony's protective shielding. Fracture lines spread like spiderwebs through the unified fleet, each perfect facet amplifying and reflecting the destructive harmonics. "Last chance, Commander," Sarah called out, her hands steady on the controls. "Stand down. Release your ships from synchronization. Or watch your perfect system tear itself apart." For a moment, just a moment, she thought she saw understanding flash across Crix's crystalline features. But then their form hardened, becoming even more rigid and perfect. "We cannot abandon perfection. We are the pinnacle of evolution. We cannot be defeated by a mechanic with a wrench," Sarah finished. She looked at her trusty tool, worn and scratched from years of use. "You know what makes this wrench special? It's not perfect. It's got dents and scratches. Each mark is a lesson learned, a problem solved. That's real evolution." The unified fleet reached critical resonance. The fractures spread faster now, each perfect crystal face reflecting and amplifying the chaos Sarah had introduced. The structure began to break apart, not violently, but almost musically, a cascade of crystalline notes that echoed through space. "My readings indicate their core matrix is failing," Zyx reported. "The synchronized fleet it's being forced to separate or face complete structural failure." Sarah watched as the massive crystalline structure fractured into its component ships, each one struggling to stabilize its own systems. The Empire's perfect formation dissolved into a chaotic scatter of vessels, their much-vaunted superiority broken by the very perfection they had sought. "This isn't possible." Crix's voice had lost its harmonious resonance, becoming almost organic in its disbelief. "We are perfect. We cannot. Can't fail?" Sarah shook her head. "Failure is how we learn, how we grow, how we get better. Perfect things can't improve, they can only break." The Imperial ships were retreating now, their perfectly aligned weapons silent, their crystalline hulls showing stress fractures that would take years to repair. But Sarah noticed something interesting about their departure. "They're not maintaining formation," Zyx observed, their voice holding a note of wonder. "Each ship is finding its own path." "Maybe they finally learned something about the value of imperfection," Sarah replied, beginning the process of powering down their makeshift resonance weapon. She looked at her wrench, then at her crystalline friend. "Speaking of which, want to help me fix all the stuff we broke defending this place? I could use someone who understands both precision and chaos." Zyx's form sparkled with what Sarah had come to recognize as joy. "You would trust me? After everything my people tried to do?" "Trust isn't about being perfect," Sarah said, already heading toward the first of many systems that would need repair. "It's about being willing to learn from mistakes." Besides, she grinned, tossing them a spare wrench. Anyone who can appreciate the beauty of a properly jury-rigged solution can't be all bad. As they worked to restore the colony's systems, Sarah couldn't help but smile at the irony. The Empire had sent their greatest warriors, armed with perfect weapons and unshakable certainty. They had been defeated not by superior firepower or advanced technology, but by a mechanic with a wrench who understood that sometimes the strongest systems are the ones that can embrace their own imperfections. In the end, that was humanity's greatest strength, not the ability to achieve perfection, but the wisdom to know that perfection itself was often the biggest flaw of all.